Hello. Last week I had a fancy lead into this program, but today I got a little delayed in my. I'm leading a practice online right before this because of circumstances beyond my control. So I'm going to have a drink of water and welcome all of you, whoever's watching. Nobody's watching yet, so I'm going to have a drink of water and wait for somebody to watch. Just playing some music because why not? So, hi, I'm Loppon Yudron, and there's nobody online right now yet, but I'd like to welcome you to my Worlds on Fire live stream. And a lot of people watch after the fact, particularly these ones that are about famous people. My theme this week is continuing on Dudjom Rinpoche's life story because there's so many poignant, intensely wonderful moments in his life story. And to just race through it just seems like a crime. So today we're going to practice together, and we're going to focus on Dudjom Rinpoche himself, his instruction for meditation, and we're going to tell stories from Dudjom Rinpoche's life. Dudjom Rinpoche, if you're new and you're watching this channel for the first time, was one of the 20th century great awakened yogi, scholar, writer, dancer, artist. Just a polymath, you might say. But polymath implies that really smart, and he definitely was really smart. But also there's he was a genuine tulku, not a fake tulku. He was very much showed complete, very clear signs that he was a tulku of Dudjom Rinpoche before him. So I'm going to pull up my notes here on the screen, and then let's see what we're going to do. Oh yeah, the realization of absolute truth. So when we left off with Dudjom Rinpoche last week, he was fleeing. Well, he was going around Tibet, and it became there was a great time. This was in the 20s, teens and 20s. He was born in 1904. He had to get his education, and some of that was provided by Dudjom Rinpoche people who came to find him in Pemaka, the hidden land of Pemaka. And some he wandered to meet the great lamas of the day. And so he went to central Tibet. He went to visit the great monasteries, for sure, including in the ones in eastern Tibet, Katok and Dzogchen. I think I'll bring you up a picture of Katok Monastery for those people who are watching after the fact. This is what Katok looks like now, or very recently, about 6 years ago. It was rebuilt. All these monasteries were rebuilt after destruction and cultural revolution. Hello, someone joined me. You found me. This is Katok Monastery, and it's one of the 5 or 6 great mother monasteries of the Nyingma tradition. So he spent some time there studying, and he also went to Dzogchen Monastery in eastern Tibet. Let's pull up a picture of Dzogchen Monastery today. You know, it wasn't that long ago we couldn't go to Wikipedia and see these things. This is the rebuilt Dzogchen Monastery, one of the great monasteries of the Nyingma tradition. And here's how it looked a few years ago, brought to you by Wikipedia. It's pretty. I like Tibetan monasteries, the way they look, the way they're nestled into the hillside. Maybe it's some past life connection, who knows, in general. And then, so he went around to all these monasteries, but then he found the connection he felt the closest to, the tradition he felt the closest to, and he really wanted to emulate his own centers, which were taking shape in his mind, at least to begin with, was a Mindroling monastery. So let's look at Mindroling Monastery today. I think this is the Tibetan Mindroling Monastery. Now it occurs to me that this could be a picture of the Indian version. So most of these monasteries have, hey Lori, thank you for saying hi. Most of these monasteries have rebuilt monasteries in India or Nepal. And also people inside Tibet reconstructed monasteries after the destruction of the Cultural Revolution, which you can read about in history books. So that's where he hung out. And he went back there and he studied the music tradition and he received many teachings and empowerments, of course. And the ritual tradition, the tormas and so forth, they all were based on even the sadhana of the Damchen Chitor, which we, if you were with me earlier, we did. His sort of, actually not the Damchen Chitor, the longer version was based on Mindroling's layout of their protectors. So he really admired the Mindroling system. It was very, there wasn't a lot of shouting and singing. It was very dignified. And in fact, if you're a monk at Mindroling Monastery, to this day, as I understand it, you memorize, before you can be admitted as a monk, get this, you memorize all the practices and prayers that they, the prayer book, you have to be able to put it in your pocket and do it all from memory. And then they'll consider you as a monk at Mindroling Monastery. And if you, the drum is all perfect in beat with all the other millions of drums and, just very elegant. And he is an elegant man. And of course, there's a wonderful history of enlightened masters. It's at Mindroling, it goes without saying, in central Tibet. And he was doing a lot of retreats and practice in his young life, long and short. He mentioned years in retreat and months in retreat and so forth. And one of his, when he's later on in his life, he didn't need to he could just do practice very briefly, like a very short retreat, and totally accomplish all these miraculous signs of practice. I'm sure he did in the other retreats also. But, he's kind of was being trained in Dudjom, and he was being trained in from his predecessor two predecessors ago, and his immediate predecessor, Dudjom Rinpoche, those texts. And he's being trained in Vajrakalaya. So as we said before, on the outside, he was doing his predecessor's Jedrung text practice, and on the inside, he had his own terma that he discovered when he was a child. Really didn't flesh it out, but he had the seed for it. And then likewise with Vajrakalaya, he became a master of his predecessors, Vajrakalaya and Ramchakputri, and there were 3 texts he combined into his massive Vajrakalaya cycle of the same name. Big long sadhana, but inside he discovered his own treasure of Vajrakalaya, which was much more suitable to the 20th century. Because it was shorter, and yet it had all the juice of the previous Vajrakalaya practice. That's the kind of thing he was doing, and things were getting worse and worse in Tibet. I just learned this week, last week he talked about political forces, sectarian forces that infiltrated sidled up to the government in Lhasa. He wasn't able to he'd started to build his monastery and Yogi Gampa in Pemaku. And he wasn't able to fulfill that wish and help those people who loved him. And no matter how hard he tried with the government, it wasn't possible. But, if we had to, or said we were going to build a huge building somewhere on a big piece of land, you can bet our government would have a lot of things to say about it too, wouldn't they? Going to make a lot of noise. Is it zoned right? So maybe they had their high side of the story too. Who knows? So at the same time, I just learned this week that the Pemako is also under pressure later from Powo, which is an adjoining region to the east of there. They wanted to break off and absorb Pemako and become an independent kingdom. And Dudjom Rinpoche then had to start trying to work with the central government to try to keep Pemako wanted to go with Central Tibet on that. So he's a very apolitical person as far as he really advised people to stay away from people with power and politics and so forth. But he was a bodhisattva and he had to tend to what needed tending to. So he had a lot going on, like us, and torn between all these different pressures going on. So what I want to do first is practice with you, and I want to review, because a couple of weeks ago, I think, and Lori, for sure you were there, Rinpoche, we saw a video of Rinpoche, remember that, giving his instruction about how to meditate, but he went really fast for us, distracted 21st century practitioners. So I want to go through that instruction very slowly, and then we can practice for a little bit, and then we'll pick up with Dudjom Rinpoche's story from there after we settle our minds. Okay, so here's his instruction. You have to sort of search for your mind, identify what your mind is and where it is, and don't let it be carried away by arising thoughts. So don't let your mind, don't let whatever comes into your mind be jerking you around. Cut the elaborations and conceptualizations of your mind and allow your mind to relax in its natural state. Let your mind simply be in your body. And allow relaxation to enter your mind. What does the state of relaxation feel like? It's like someone who has just finished doing a lot of exhausting work after laboring long and hard to accomplish their task. Once it's finally over, they experience a blissful satisfaction and are content to simply rest. So us mental laborers, we never come to an end of thoughts, right? But physical labor, if you have somebody in your family or yourself or a physical laborer, you work in the garden all day long, and then you're very satisfied at the end of the day, and you sit down and you go, oh. And you're happy, right? And content, blissful satisfaction, he says. Quite naturally, the mind will arise at a state of calm, and the mind will remain relaxed for a while before it resumes being caught up in the usual pattern of wild and unimaginable thoughts. So, following this example, you should try to guard and protect your mind, even in the midst of all kinds of turbulent thoughts. Leave your mind in its own natural state and relax. Let your body be still and your speech silent. Do not think about whether or not you should do this or that. Just settle your mind into a state of relaxation and calm, in which there's no chasing after objects and no wild and crazy thoughts. So chasing after objects, that can be, sure, a bird flies by and you follow it wherever it goes, or a beautiful person walks by and your mind goes that way. But there's also, hearing, like now the birds are chirping, or say somebody, quite often people come up and play hip-hop music in front of my house, get really super involved in that, and that all sorts of feelings come up about it. That's sound affecting you. So body, speech, mind, right? And the touch, beautiful thought of beautiful things you want to touch. That's still a thought, but or some pain in your body, mild. It's very hard to work with heavy-duty pain, but some sort of mild thing. Don't let your mind go through it over and over again when you're meditating, unless you're doing a different kind of meditation for this shamatha. That's not the point. So your body, speech, and your mind. And here's where word objects is a little not clear, and that's the way we use it so much. There's mental objects, okay? So Samjung, right? Sam and Samjung, Tibetan, I think, for you scholars. So some random thought comes up, and then you fixate on it, and you have to follow it wherever it goes. Of course, this never happens to me. And so there's his advice. Don't follow after those things. Instead, you should find yourself in a state that's vividly open and empty, brilliantly clear and deeply relaxed. This state of ease is an indication that mind has arrived at its inherent clarity, and it will simply settle itself in that clarity. But it won't remain like that for long, right? Something happens. A thought comes up. When that rising takes place, let your awareness recognize it as soon as it occurs. Leave it at that, with that simple recognition. You don't have to say thinking, which is one tradition of shamatha. Just touch base with that. If mind is left in its natural state, it will become pacified, and all the rising thoughts naturally subside. If you leave them, they'll liberate themselves. They kind of unwind and open up. It's like the waves in an ocean. They're left. A wave just dissolves back into the ocean. There's no place else for them to go, right? There's no place for thoughts to go but back into the ocean of your mind. All right, so those were his initial instructions for how to practice shamatha. What's missing for this? Candy, so good to see you. What's missing for this is not missing, but this is Dudjom Rinpoche's advice. We really have to pay attention, right? And there's different levels of mindfulness practice, different levels of shamatha practice. And this is kind of a higher level shamatha practice without using really super contrived. Actually, Loppon Yudron, Candy, you were there yesterday. I was talking about this, right? To people who are really haven't learned at all about any of this stuff yet, you haven't meditated at all. And you both probably know, I see there's 5 people on right now, and I see 2 people I know, so I'm kind of speaking to them. But feel free to jump in the comment section. Loppon Yudron Rinpoche was talking yesterday online about the different levels of mindfulness practice. And the most base level is the one that's taught as, mindfulness, meditation in our society. Thank goodness it's taught. Where you're using the object of your breath, typically. However, the specifics don't matter so much. And that's considered a kind of contrived meditation, or anytime you're meditating on a physical object, for example, and then, you got to bring it back and all that stuff. This is much more open, isn't it? You're just sitting with the silence, speech, your body is quiet. He didn't say anything about posture either, did he? No big deal. So at the very beginning, your Organ Chong Rinpoche said one time, the posture is very important, I have a habit of doing that anyway, sitting very nicely with the spine erect. It does reduce the thoughts as well. So it's kind of a physical contrivance to reduce the movements of thoughts in your body. Better back up. But this is not contrived. I didn't say anything about how to sit. Just simply settle in that clarity. Okay, so we're going to give it a try. Did you get that? Do you have any questions about that, his instructions? We can go back to it if you like. And then in a little bit, after we've talked more about his story, we're going to come back and get some of his advice about particular kinds of problems that can come up in your meditation. Okay? So let's meditate for a little while. So peaceful, I don't want to stop. That's the way it should be. So actually, that's a good point. When you want to meditate, you don't want to. When you're establishing a meditation practice, it's important to not go so far beyond that your limit. You have an internal point where it becomes uncomfortable mentally because you're unaccustomed to resting meditation. Actually, there's an old saying Lama Tarchin used to quote, when you're a beginner, you have to chase after meditation. And later on, meditation chases after you. So you have to do some effort. It feels effortful to do this, even this subtle kind of shamatha. In the beginning, I mean, it could be years, or it depends on you. So, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So if you force yourself to extend it longer, I saw somebody. You'll see these corporate types of meditators who are like, you gotta do an hour a day, whether you want to or not. Force yourself. This is totally going to backfire. You're never going to give up meditation eventually, for sure. Right? We're just humans. We have that kind of mind. So we don't want to be pushed around even by ourselves. You made it into something unpleasant. So you want to leave off your session, end your session before it becomes a chore in the beginning. And there's no harm in doing small, frequent sessions throughout your meditation career. But there are actually, though, also benefits to continuing on for longer periods of time, I found. But it takes time to get there, right? Maybe anybody might have a experience with that. They can comment in the comment section. Okay, so let's move on. So Dudjom Rinpoche had many teachers, and he was giving huge cycles. I gave the Rinchen Terzo twice. Once we discussed when he gave in Pemako, and then he gave it in Kongpo when he was 19. And then he went to Mindreling. And then at 21, on an impulse, he went to see one of his favorite lamas, Jedrung Rinpoche Jampai Jugne, also known as Dudjom Namke Dorje. And he had a Terton name. I think this is why they have. So you see, all these lamas have many honorific names. And the Terton our treasure revealer has their own treasure revealing name. So I believe this is Terton. It's not just me, but Nishal Kempo straightened something out for me, which is Terton Zilnan Namkai Dorje of Katok Monastery is the same as Jedrung Rinpoche. Jedrung Rinpoche is a famous name, and you can't find Terton Zilnan Namkai Dorje anywhere but in the in the story of Dudjom Rinpoche. So and his Sungvam, his collected works, because Dudjom Rinpoche became a major holder of this Terton's treasures after he got old. He made him custodian of at least one of his treasure cycles, and they ended up in the Dudjom collected works. Dudjom Rinpoche decided when he was pretty young that chasing after termas and having a lot of hopes and fears about it was not the way to go. Instead, he wanted to devote himself to preserving and carrying on, transmitting the many important treasure revealers of the past. So he became a big empowerment giver, and but he was also a practitioner of all those cycles, and he made them usable. So there's sometimes corruptions that come into the text, because these texts are recorded by the older ones were scribes wrote them down, and of course, just like a biblical literature, mistakes crept in. He corrected them and made them into usable forms, so that you could go into a shrine room like ours here and make it into a complete practice of many different ones. The most famous one for us is Ryo Songshit, right? It's a whole terma. It's part of a whole important terma cycle, and he made this practice. Now everybody does Dudjom Rinpoche because it got everything. It's perfect in every way. So he did that. He didn't have ambition about discovering treasures. It was okay with him. He just sort of let that go. And in fact, the treasures he discovered when he was a child, he burnt them all. Go, no! Okay. So he went to see Jedrung Rinpoche, Terten Zilna Namkhai Dorje, and Rinpoche on a whim. And the Lama said, I'm getting old, I want to make you the custodian of this particular treasure cycle. And he also wanted to give Dudjom Rinpoche a secret, Jamgon Kongtrul's secret empowerment of Dorje Trollo. And they were sitting together in a room, and Jedrung Rinpoche's eyes, got wide open during the latter part of this empowerment, and he shouted, "Pet!" really loud, I presume. And in that instant, his body, Dudjom Rinpoche's body, perception, mind, became unimpeded. All notions of solidity disappeared. And the absolute wisdom empowerment was bestowed. And Jedrung Rinpoche said, Supratishta ye soha. And that meant, that's usually when to seal the realization of yourself as deity during an empowerment ceremony. But in this case, it was to stabilize Dudjom Rinpoche's realization of the nature of his mind, direct experience within him. So I'm going to repeat that in a different translation from a different text, from Nishal Kin and Richard Barron. He said, "Pet, and my mind and body disappeared without a trace. And as I rested for a short while, the Guru said, this is timeless awareness. The timeless awareness that is the ultimate point of empowerment. May it be stabilized in you. Tishta Vajra." Without having to concentrate, I experienced a spacious openness. This is the enlightened intent of the ultimate lineage. So this is called Ngotru, or the Rikpe Tsalwang. These are wonderful things if you haven't received them from a Dzogchen master. This is why the most important reason we have Dzogchen masters, and we develop a bond with them, a personal relationship with the master. Even if it's only seeing them once a year. And I haven't seen one of my masters in 12 years. Master is an icky word for English in English language, isn't it? It's the only one we have. It's actually a translation of Loppon. There are many, many ways. That's just an example of the way that they can introduce you to the state, invoke in you a state that you can always call back in your experience. In the case of Dudjom Rinpoche, he said, from that time on, my mind remained relaxed and open. I felt no need to boast about spending months or years in retreat, nor did I feel the need to focus forcefully in my meditation, nor cling to practice schedules. I knew the power of the lineage realization of absolute truth had been transferred to me. This karmically connected great teacher was none other than Guru Padmasambhava. So what do we learn from this? Well, Dudjom Rinpoche was already, he had miraculous occurrences in his sadhana retreats. He'd done 3 nundros early in life. That's a good question, Candy. I'm going to bring that up on the screen. What book was that a passage from? There's 2 places. This is a big, thick, expensive book, and last I knew it was out of print. But you can probably find a used one. It's a big book of lives of the masters of particularly the Longchen Nyingtik tradition of the Nyingma school. Nishal Khenpo. And then also there's we've been speaking for the last few weeks about from Light of Indestructible Wisdom, the beautiful biography of Dudjom Rinpoche from Khenpo Sewan Dongya. And its story is told in both places, so you can reread it. So what I'm saying is, clearly he was real, he was a Buddha, in, in his previous life as Dudjom Rinpoche. And then he could remember his life in his early years, and all this things just came really easy for him. But still, there was some subtle something that he hadn't realized yet that made him feel he had to, adhere to practice schedule, have a kind of contrived, the kind of contrived life that we have as meditation practitioners. Focus really forcefully on the meditation and so forth. He could always rest. He just stayed like that. And that's what realization is called. Next, we're going to go to Dudjom Rinpoche talking about what's not realization. Okay, because most of us are not, well, I don't know most of us. What will happen is you'll get a taste, typically with this Ngutra or direct introduction from the Lama. And you can call it back up so you know what that experience is like. The experience passes, right? Like a patch on your clothes that eventually falls off. That's in one of the examples. What are the other examples? I'm forgetting them right now. But it's not a permanent thing. But for Dudjom Rinpoche, that was realization, total breakthrough. And it made a permanent change in him. And I hope that happens to you. I hope it happens to me. But for the rest of us, it's calling it back and learning what's beyond shamatha. So we're still calling the practice hidam. I just recited shamatha in the Nyingma tradition, that's what we say. And then, but this is, the realization of absolute truth. It's beyond even the subtle contrivance of that kind of shamatha that he's talking about. So, isn't that interesting? Okay, so I'm going to, then now we're going to hear from Dudjom Rinpoche. Isn't that great? I'm going to put a little video on the screen. Maybe I'll change the camera. So it's we'll go to we have one camera on the window because we just offered the sur a little bit ago. And I'm going to bring in Dudjom Rinpoche's picture to that scene. And before he starts, so this is about 3 different kinds of things that can happen in your meditation, experiences that you have. What are they? Bliss, clarity, and non-thought. And he gives, they're not permanent, they're just kind of passing windows of experience. And so he's going to talk about them, how they can actually become obstacles in shamatha practice.
When you become somewhat familiar with this practice, you may experience a state of physical and mental bliss or ecstasy. Or, if you're meditating at night, you might experience a state of clarity, as if daylight had dawned. Different experiences such as these can occur, and they are signs that you are cultivating the peace and calm of shamatha. There's no fault in seeing these as positive, but it'd be a mistake to become attached to them. If you just allow them to occur without feeling any attachment towards them, they can only assist you in your practice, and no harm will come of them. So whatever experiences of bliss or clarity occur, there's no need to grasp at them with attachment, and no need to suppress them either. Simply allow them to dissolve naturally.
So what I'm going to do now is alternate periods of where Rinpoche has given you instruction. And then we're going to just rest in non-conceptuality. You've heard it, and then just rest in non-conceptuality. And that allows it to really take root in you and blossom later on.
다야 무도베냠 세전에 나토메 와지게 되니 대야 자네메 와지게야 지 니에 코면 바지라 지 톰톰 지용이어래 다 들라 무도베냠 세전에 또스지 신네데 베데마 남도 샤라마레데 남도 다 당차다 가야메 바지게 코라 되네 베 군지가 되네 마 틈도요 돼 틈도 다디 상거래 상당 간지지가나 레상 농로사 되네 시바데 베데 반낭래야 때네 도서지 루지발 종대한잖아 되네 도서는 거.
You could also have what is known as an experience of absence of thought. This is a dark, dull, and drowsy state in which there is no awareness whatsoever. You're not quite asleep, but you're in a blank dullness. This experience of absence of thought does involve some calm abiding, but there are no rising thoughts and none of mind's inherent clarity. This is because you have drifted into the alaya, the all-ground, and you will need to alert yourself and awaken from it. In order to clear it away, straighten your body, exhale the foul air, and focus your awareness in the space in front of you.
Timazina, Tom Digan, Desana, and Gom La Port and Tangomare Gom, Generate, the Indian day, Tendege, Matoviam Zona, the Yan Sang. Tene Pegora, Ripalangarta education.
Otherwise, if you remain in such dullness, your meditation will be ineffective and will never evolve at all. This experience of absence of thought is a fault in meditation, and it must be cleared away whenever it occurs. Then it is also very important to sharpen your awareness. Practicing like this is the way to develop calm abiding.
Then isem maji rambaula lebe lede kalajaya di ngala neba de la neba se di ngane namdo ji sharwa de la njua se che den jua junan jua ngoshi nena neba ngoshi genji ki trempa ji yeba de la ne rikpa se che ne jo riksum se ta de la se.
When the mind is resting naturally and at ease in its own unaltered state, that is referred to as the stillness of meditation. If a thought arises out of this state of stillness, that is called movement. And that which knows when mind is in a state of stillness and recognizes any movement is your awareness, or rikpa.
Okay. Wow. Right from the horse's mouth, huh? From a real Buddha. So you can imagine that there are meditative traditions where people think, oh, my mind got so clear that I had all these psychic powers. The day seemed like the example he gave, the night seemed like day. I could see through in the dark. When people would be coming to visit me, I can anticipate that they're going to visit me. I can just see it in my profound clarity. And you think, oh, that's really great. But then it goes. And then the following day, you can't do anything. And then a week or a month, whatever it is. Then you could think, experiences of bliss are the best worst, because you always want to reproduce them. It's impossible not to want to reproduce them. And it seems when you're in them like it's the way you're going to be for the rest of your life. But guess what? Probably not. Maybe. So you guys are Nundra practitioners. If you have something like this happen to you, where it seems like a breakthrough experience, don't dismiss it. I mean, rejoice. Enjoy it. But then do a very simple guru yoga of receiving the 4 empowerments from your lama, and rest there nicely without grasping. And don't try to reproduce it or contrive it, because that just doesn't work. And then the third category of non-thought, you go, wow, somebody just went a half hour without having a single thought arise. Personally, I could be. I actually think there's like this subconscious gossip going on through all that. when it's just a nyam or meditation experience. We could talk more about Dudjom Rinpoche about it. He didn't say. But I think there's subtle thoughts there when you have this experience of non-thought, seemingly for a long period of time. The thing about non-thought is that as soon as you have the thought, oh, wait a minute, have I not been thinking for all this time? You're thinking. So you just really have no way of tracking it. But it's not. He's just putting it pretty much in the negative category. Isn't that sad? One thing we might be able to do is actually it's regarding a settling in the alaya, which is the what are we going to call it? The soupy mess of thoughts and emotions that are at the base of your mind, occluding any true experience of the ultimate truth. So there's this kind of soup out of which comes all these thoughts and so forth. And if you sink down into it, you're never going to get anywhere with your practice. I think this has happened to me at times. This mental dullness, they'll call it. And this is one of those big kinds of meditation experience. And his advice was to sit up straight and exhale. He didn't demonstrate, but I'd say forcefully, blowing out the stale air, they say. You could do the 9 breaths if you're a Nundra practitioner, but you can also just let it all out, sit up straight. And what was the other piece? Note that you have the awarer, the knower of whether you're, touch base with the knower of whether you are sinking or whether you are abiding in Ritpa. And anyway, we should listen to that again, but maybe not tonight. So he was full of advice like that, and his Wisdom Nectar, these are books, this Nishal Ken book, very few people can find it or afford it. If you can, by all means get it, but Light of Indestructible Wisdom is very important as his life story, and Ron Gary's translation of a lot of smaller texts from the Dudjom Rinpoche, instructional advice to students. It was very pithy, and then several sort of songs of realization, guru yogas. When Dudjom Rinpoche traveled around, people would say, "Oh, Rinpoche, I really need a practice of White Tara. And could you write me one?" And he would literally have all these. He'd write it down, hand it to the person, and to construct the Dudjom Rinpoche's collected works, they could never get all these pieces of paper in it. I think they're working on expanding a current one with more gathered slips of paper, like that. So a lot of the shorter practices from Tibet and relating to his Tibetan students were like that, just written off the cuff, and not like a big Dharma experience. So there's 5 main practices in the Dudjom Rinpoche sadhana tradition. What are they? Anybody want to tell me? What's the peaceful Dakini? Do you know? Who is she? We haven't touched much on it here, but next week we're going to tell the story of the discovery of the. We hear the story of the discovery of the Khandro Tuktik, heart essence of the Dakini. Yeshe Sogyal, peaceful Yeshe Sogyal. Whole cycle about that. That's the peaceful Dakini. What's the wrathful Dakini, people? I know you know. What came in from Dudjom Rinpoche and really was propagated by Dudjom Rinpoche? Oh, come on now. Oh, look, John's here. Hey, John. So Tromon Nakpo was the end of that, answer that quiz question, but we will go here into John's question. You think no thought is really a state with no thoughts, or is it they arise but they don't follow them? That was my argument. At least knowing my own mind, you can maybe tell me in your mind. Yeah, you said here below because people say, oh, thoughts are always going to be there. I'm with you, John. Just based on my experience, and we can talk to, of course, a great Rinpoche about it, but I think there's the subtle, was it Luma 10? I can't remember the name of them. Subtle subconscious gossip, as Dudjom Rinpoche said, is going on all the time, ruminating down there in the soup. I think that is probably still going on, but you're unaware of it. So this is not a holy state where you're saying you can't, thoughts will arise. Yeah, thoughts will always arise unless you're in kind of, well, if you're on, for example, thank you, John, for trauma there. There's a slight delay from me getting these things. But I think it's a great question for our lamas. I think sometimes it's expressed as a kind of mental dullness, it's sinking, this kind of words, as well as I do as an old-time practitioner about that. Do they have karma? They do have karma. If they're scrolling, if they're rolling around in your and you're not really even conscious of them, these mental events, the semjul, they have karma. I'm pretty sure. So, because of this dullness is ignorance, right? So, ignorance is not where we're going. But these are great questions. Thanks, John. So, peaceful Dakini Yeshisogya, wrathful Dakini Tramanakmal, peaceful Guru. Who's the peaceful Guru in the Dudjom Tirasar cycle? We're just about to do a retreat on it at Pema Osling. There's a peaceful Guru cycle, peaceful and wrathful Guru cycle, but the main practice of the father lineage, the Yab, is Soke Tuktik, late-born Vajra. And very peaceful with Mandarava, and long life deity aspect, which is, if you want to do a retreat on it, it's very inexpensive this year to do it online, and very easy. The schedule is kind of easy. At Pema Osling, they're combining it with a wealth deity aspect of Rinpoche practice, Kanda Norla. I'm going up to that, in case you can't tell. And then the wrathful Guru Rinpoche practice is Docha Trilla. And then what's the Yidam practice, the meditation on deity practice, the main one in the Dudjom Tirasar that we talked about tonight? I was going to show you a picture. Well, what's that? So this is a purba, and so there's a whole cycle with a symbolic deity that has a three-sided tent peg here, a dagger, and that represents the Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Dharmakaya aspects of awakened mind. So you're cutting through, you're stabbing this ignorance of the actual reality of things with your own completely awakened mind, the three kayas. And so that's Vajrakalaya is the main yidam of the lineage. And there's lots more, but those are the main focuses for Dudjom Yangtze as well. All right. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. It's so nice to see your beautiful faces in my comments. It's 7 o'clock, so gosh, I really should bring in a Dudjom. Let's do I have a Vajrakalaya dedication of Mira here. Instead of doing Sonamdi, which we always do, right? Nothing wrong with that, but Let me read this out loud. See what he said. What the Guru Rinpoche said. This is a sadhana of Guru Rinpoche. From Guru Rinpoche. We do this practice of Dudjom Rinpoche here. In the mandala of non-dwelling wisdom, spontaneously accomplishing the enlightened body, speech, and mind, may the level of Vajrakara, Dorje be attained, Vajra youth, for the glory of all beings. Thank you, everyone. Please come back next week so we can do the switcheroo if you want to follow me. From 5:15, I do on the Maya Mountain side, which is a smaller, less known channel. For those of you who are Vajrakalaya practitioners, empowered as Vajrakalaya practitioners, we do Vajrakalaya protectors and the Sur for the people who've died in the epidemic and others. And then right away I come over here. I'm on Mondays, just Mondays, and then the other 2 days we do Wednesday and Friday. We do the same thing with Vajrakalaya protectors and Sur. So 5:15, and on those 2 days it's not as speedy because I don't have to be here for this. I'm trying to not impinge on the time that people are in sessions at the summer retreat at Pemosling, because that was so important to them. Dudjom Rinpoche, who's here on here. A summer retreat was really, really important to Rinpoche. So I'm trying not to overlap as much as I possibly can. That's a very close, shaving it very, very closely, right? Okay, take care, everyone. Bye-bye now.